Production IG is a studio with a relatively decent backlog of shows as far as anime studios go. Like any company, there were obviously a few fumbles along the way. I'd even go so far as to argue that some of their products bordered on downright horrendous at times. Looking at you, Uzumaki.
Wow, this is garbage.
That said, their reputation is still pretty good due to the fact that on an overall scale, their highs have always been significantly greater than any lows they might have fallen into. In fact, a good number of their best performing adaptations consisted of some of the most recognizable shows in anime, primarily Fooly Cooly, Ghost in the Shell, and Guilty Crown. In addition to this, they've been known to have worked on series such as Ace of Diamonds, Aoashi, Psycho-Pass, and Sengoku Basara. Although these four may not necessarily be on the same level of popularity as the aforementioned three, they've managed to garner a decent sized following of extremely dedicated fans who single-handedly managed to keep discussions about their respective favorite shows circulating through other means, whether it be running schizophrenic ramblings on forum sites, non-stop gay shipping, or really bad fanfiction. And look, you can make fun of these people all you want, but it doesn't change the fact that obsessive behavior like this, if done enough, can single-handedly prevent a show from being forgotten. And Production IG seem to be very good at picking out IPs that'll catch the eyes of very specific but insanely loyal and active type of viewer bases. That being said though, if we wanted to talk about truly iconic shows within their catalog, I don't think anything can compare to the 2014 to 2015 era when this specific studio managed to get their hands on what were easily the two most iconic sports manga ongoing at the time, Kuroko's Basketball and Haikyu. If you were an anime fan during this period of time, then you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that these two shows were absolutely massive while they were airing. We're talking about mainstream levels of popularity during an era where anime was still nowhere near being socially acceptable to like. This was the first time in my life I had ever seen so many fucking nerds suddenly taking an interest in sports. You couldn't watch a single vlog in Japan on YouTube during this time period without seeing a poster of either show posted somewhere in a shop in the background or something. The shows themselves were a subject of rivalry between their respective fan bases, and truthfully, I don't understand why. Sure, on the surface they may seem very alike, both revolve around a protagonist with stupidly colored hair, both shows pair their respective main characters with a cool, bad-tempered prodigy to form the ultimate duo, but that's about it in terms of similarities. In fact, if you literally just take a second to analyze both shows individually, there's actually very little overlap in terms of story, theme, and execution, with the biggest difference being that Haikyu is pretty much just better in every single way. I probably just upsetted a few people by saying that, and for that I'm sorry. I know the truth can hurt sometimes, but you need to hear it. This show is amazing. I love it to absolute bits, which is why the remainder of this video will be me attempting to vocalize what makes this show so special to me, how it made me genuinely interested in a niche-ass sport like volleyball of all things, and why I truly believe it is the best modern sports anime of the 2000s. The story of Haikyu tells the tale of our protagonist Hinata Shoyo, a loud, extremely energetic idiot who's got nothing but volleyball in his brain. When Hinata was a kid, he happened to catch a glimpse of a high school national volleyball tournament playing at an electronics store. One of the teams playing during the broadcast was a school under the name Karasuno High, and out of all the giants looming in the court, Hinata instead found himself drawn by the shortest player among them, who despite his small stature, was Karasuno's designated ace player, the Little Giant. The sight of a short player going toe-to-toe against people twice his height was awe-inspiring to Hinata, who was a rather tiny boy himself. This small but significant moment would forever stick with him throughout his adolescence, sparking a newfound hope in his heart that perhaps, despite his very minuscule person, maybe he too could become one of the very best players to ever set foot onto the court, instantaneously turning volleyball from just another casual sport he enjoys to a lifelong passion. Fast forward to his third year of junior high, and Hinata, despite being the only member of the boys' volleyball club at his middle school, has gone through with relentless training with what little resources he had, even managing to gather enough friends to enter his very first tournament for graduation. Unfortunately, his team, consisting of complete newbies and people he pushed from other sports clubs, was naturally far from equipped to compete with those from other schools. To make matters even worse, their very first match pissed them against Kitagawa Daiichi, a powerhouse school that were favorites to win the tournament. It's during this competition Hinata will meet the so-called king of the court, Kageyama Tobio, a volleyball prodigy who is said to be a bona fide genius at the sport. The match goes pretty much exactly how you would expect it to. Kitagawa is absolutely wrecking their shit with basically zero effort. Hinata was the best player on his team and he couldn't even properly receive, so everyone else basically folded instantly the second the ball came their way. Hinata tries to pick up their slack. He's running around the court trying to be everywhere at once, crashing into shit while trying to get the ball. It was a respectable but futile effort. effort. The match trudges on with the score gap not getting any smaller as time went on. Any small amount of points they managed to get was basically just their opponents making mistakes every now and then. Kageyama was feeling a teensy bit conflicted because Hinata was by all means a shit player, but he had the athletic capabilities to be an extremely powerful player if honed correctly. Plus, this kid was not giving up. The match was basically over. Hinata was exhausted and his teammates couldn't do shit, and the Kitagawa boys were basically still fresh stamina-wise. Yet despite this, the thought of losing the match wasn't even present in his mind. In fact, he was still dead set on winning the tournament. His spirit was not wavering. Unfortunately for him though, this was the start of the show, which is basically the only time in anime when sheer perseverance is not a guaranteed win. Despite his best efforts, going so far as to crash into barriers trying to get the ball after a failed set, the skill gap was just way too high for him to overcome, and as the final point was counted, the referee blew his whistle, putting an end to Hinata's first and sadly last match of junior high. This is the first episode. I barely know anything about this kid, besides the fact that he likes hitting balls, but in spite of this, I couldn't help but feel like absolute shit, man. You could physically feel the devastation hit him. He goes from loud, insecurely boisterous to just completely quiet. He couldn't even bring himself to talk back when Kageyama gave him shit after just crushing him. He pretty much stays depressed for the rest of the day until they coincidentally see Kageyama and the rest of the Kitagawa players leaving the building. The sight of their opponents light a fire in Hinata, giving him enough willpower to pick himself up and yell out to Kageyama, proudly proclaiming that he'll defeat the king of the court one day, to which he tells Hinata to get strong if he ever wants to win against him. From there onwards, Hinata trains relentlessly for the remainder of his third year of middle school, now with a new goal on top of just joining Karasuno. However, life has a funny way of choosing who comes into it, as Hinata is hit with the biggest twist of fate when it turns out he and Kageyama have both ended up on the same team at, you guessed it, Karasuno. Hijinks and tomfoolery ensue. Now, crazy take, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is by no small metric an amazing first episode, and a perfect setup to what was going to be a long-running series. Right off the bat, it wastes no time establishing who Hinata is as a character and what his motivations are at the very start, and spends the rest of the episode driving home just how dedicated he is to his goals, showing us bright and clear just what lengths he's willing to go for them. This might come as a shock to viewers of a specific genre, but I'm actually a very big fan of active rather than reactive main characters. You see, story needs to have a point in order for me to actually give a fuck about what I'm watching. Unless you're like a sitcom or an episodic comedy made purely for laughs and nothing else, then I don't see a reason to watch you unless you have some form of end goal in mind, which is probably why shows about cute girls doing cute things are just fucking garbage to watch, cause there's literally no purpose to any of the shit happening on screen. Not cute, not funny, nothing. Fuck this shit. Simultaneously though, it's also not enough to just have a goal. Part of your job as a writer is also making me care about getting to that goal, and that's where protagonists who are active really shine. The thing about motives is that it doesn't just drive the story forward, it also gives the character you're writing a certain level of agency. When a character has a goal, then it gives them a reason to take their destiny into their own hands, and actively do things in pursuit of that goal. This is why a lot of isekai animes are just worthless slop, because more often than not the main characters are just blank slates with no goals or aspirations whatsoever. Just blank pieces of cardboard who do nothing but react to the stupid bullshit around them while trying to kill the Demon King. Not out of their own sense of justice or anything, but because a god has told them to do so, or something. If a character doesn't care about their own goal, then why the hell should I care? This is a problem that's pretty much non-existent with Hinata, as he's pretty much the perfect poster boy for an active protagonist. He wants to be the best player, and one of the stepping stones to that goal is to become the ace of Karasuno. He's had this goal for literal years, and despite the fact that he's pretty much a midget in comparison to the average volleyball player, and growing up in an environment where proper training wasn't an option, he never uses that as an excuse to slack off or get complacent. His boisterous attitude may have come off as arrogant and naive to most people and caused him to get endlessly teased, but he always made sure to walk the talk, training every single day to keep his physical condition in tip-top shape, asking for help from the girls' volleyball team. The dude managed to scrounge up a team in his final year of middle school made up of newbies and friends from other sports, for God's sakes. He didn't just talk about his dreams while complaining about his shit situation. He never just stood still and waited for life to hopefully throw him a bone out of pity. He actively took action and worked himself to the bone for the sake of achieving his dream. Unlike some people I know, the fact that they were able to convey all this in just one episode and still effectively build upon it for the rest of the series is downright impressive. And one of the best ways they do this is through Hinata's rivalry with Kageyama. The relationship between these two characters is really the greatest aspect aspect of this anime. Kageyama is an example of a perfect rival because not only is he the perfect foil to Hinata, but his character on his own is insanely compelling. He's introduced into the story as this unstoppable volleyball prodigy, a ruthless asshole who looks down on weaker players and has absolutely no regard for anyone around him. Nothing but another tall and powerful wall that our protagonist has to overcome. That all comes crashing down pretty much the moment he got put into the same team as him, because as it turns out, the best team in the prefecture rejected him. This wasn't due to his lack of skill or talent, but instead because he was a giant douche whose stubborn, uncompromising ego tended to hinder a team's performance more than his abilities could carry it. This then comes full circle when it's revealed that his reputation as the king of the court was actually a nickname given to him by his own teammates at Kitagawa, a title given not as a compliment to his volleyball skills, but instead as a way to condemn him for his self-centered attitude on the court that ultimately caused all his teammates to reject him. The reason why Kageyama and Hinata's rivalry works is the same reason why most great rivalries work. They're two sides of the same coin. Hinata is energetic, cheerful, and infectiously passionate about volleyball, and while he doesn't have a very good grasp of any of the technical skills needed to play, his superhuman-like physical abilities does a pretty good job of making up for it. On the other hand, Kageyama is capable of pretty much doing anything on the court, from serving, spiking, receiving, etc. Unfortunately, he's also moody, arrogant, short-tempered, rude, and uncompromising, all of which are traits that make him a detriment in a team sport. It's not the strongest player that wins, but the strongest team, after all. A good chunk of this show is centered around how these two navigate both through their own personal failings as well as learning to become better partners. I think my favorite part about their dynamic is that although they do progressively get better at teamwork and comedically butt heads all the time, you always get the sense that they're still keeping a certain distance between each other, never truly becoming friends for a good portion of the show. And it kinda makes sense. I mean, it took them 4 whole episodes just to finally accept the fact that they're stuck with and have to rely on each other if they actually want to win their games. One of the most interesting developments of their dynamic starts off around the early parts of Season 2. Her and Snow are currently attending a joint training camp after suffering a crushing defeat at the qualifying tournament the previous season and losing their chance at nationals. By this point, everyone on the team realized they were becoming stagnant. Even Hinata and Kageyama's signature move was becoming too predictable to get them winning results. Up to this point, the quick attack was a maneuver where Kageyama had majority of the control. Sure, it may be a move he can only pull off due to Hinata's athleticism, but it put Hinata in a position where he had to rely on Kageyama, as he was in charge of getting the ball to his hand, and what angle of his hand he would land on, which would simultaneously decide the trajectory of the ball as well. Metaphorically, he was essentially the gun while Kageyama was the one holding him, which is now starting to not sit right. It's here that they reach an impasse. Hinata wants to try having more agency when performing the move by properly learning to spike instead of just closing his eyes and swinging, while Kageyama doesn't like the idea of him doing that because he has zero confidence in Hinata being able to improve in time for the tournament, so he'd prefer to just keep things the way they currently are instead of trying to improve the technique and possibly ruin their synergy. Better to have a weaker move that they can effectively pull off than a move that is supposedly stronger but useless because they're incapable of performing it. This clash of mindset ultimately results in them blowing up at each other in a huge physical argument. From here onwards, their relationship continues to strain for several episodes, training very minimally with each other and their egos continuing to clash until eventually they decide to just train separately for now to work out their own issues. What I like about this whole debacle is that the show never goes out of its way to frame either side as wrong or right, instead just showcasing it as a genuine clash of ideals. Hinata's not wrong for not wanting to have to rely on someone else and desiring to be better as an individual player, and Kageyama is also not wrong to have concerns with drastically changing the status quo with such a steep deadline, and for a tournament with incredibly high stakes at that. Both perspectives are totally valid in their own way because although ego is definitely a factor in their decisions, they both also just want what they think is best for the team at the end of the day. Hence why there's no big reconciliation scene, no sappy apologies. Instead, they just adapt and take it as another learning experience on how to work better and evolve as partners. Speaking of the team though, can I just take a moment to talk about how much I love these guys? Like, I cannot even begin to express how fun it is to watch all these goobers. There's Tanaka, the token, loud, boisterous dumbass with a heart of gold. Nishinoya, an extremely cool midget responsible for one of the cringiest memes ever produced by the show.
Let's kill this guy, let's beat him.
Tsushima, a sassy, smug, tall asshole who easily has one of the most funny but compelling character arcs in the series, centered around just finding his passion for a sport where he's not only surrounded by monsters that out-talent him in almost every way, but also caused him some pretty nasty trust issues that I think are never properly addressed, I'll be honest. Then there's Yamaguchi, his bitch boy. He has a unique surf, and that's really about all I care to know about him. He did have a nice moment in Season 2 though.
You are a worthless bitch-ass nigga.
These are just the standard standouts from Kurosano, because truthfully, if I were to start listing out every single character who made an impression on me, we'd be here all day. Because believe it or not, despite the large roster of people, a good majority of them are either still impactful to the story or bursting with so much personality that it's almost impossible not to love them. The show obviously operates on a tournament-based style, so there's naturally going to be a few matches against cannon fodder thrown in between the battles Kurosano will eventually have with their major rivals. But despite this, the show doesn't cheap out on putting a certain level of substance to these so-called filler matches. Almost every single team we encounter throughout the story, even the least important ones, have their own story behind them, showcasing the different perspectives of various different players, each with their own struggles, motivation for being on the court, and I think that's really great because that's just true to life. These fodder teams may just seem like obstacles in our main character's way, but the reality is that they're all people who are just as passionate about the sport as anyone else, and they all have their own ways of engaging with volleyball, even if they're not all that good at playing it. I know it's a small thing and it probably seems like I'm glazing a little too hard, but this tiny aspect really does destroy the idea that this world solely revolves around Kurosano and makes the setting feel much more alive. I also like that there's absolutely no animosity whatsoever between these characters outside of the tournaments, because yeah, no fucking shit. That's the way it's supposed to be. They're high schoolers playing a goddamn sport. It is not that serious. The competitive and petty aspects stay entirely on the court and almost never carry their way into the real world unless your name is Oikawa. Yay! As previously mentioned, the early portions of Season 2 actually take place during a joint training camp program between Kurosano and teams they have or will eventually face, and while others called it slow and boring, I thought it was one of the best parts of the story in terms of character interactions and personal growth. It's also largely helped by the fact that this arc introduces the most goated character in the entire series. No, I will not elaborate on that. Overall, Haikyu is just peak. A better reviewer might be able to extend this video further, but there's really not much else I can say without going into heavy spoilers, and I'd honestly like to avoid that because if you haven't seen this show, this is your sign to do so, and I don't want to ruin that for you. You can practically feel the author's genuine love and raw passion for volleyball as it's practically leaking through every pore, from the story, to the characters, to the insanely detailed strategies incorporated throughout the games. Watching the characters interact, bouncing off of each other's energy, and just getting stupidly hyped every time they make a cool play feels comforting. It's the kind of feeling you get when you hang out with your friend who has an extremely niche interest that you know nothing about, but they're so autistically enthusiastic about it that you can't help but match their energy. This is not to say that the story is perfect or that the character writing is revolutionary in any way, shape, or form, but it does so well with blending together its wacky shonen moments with grounded concepts and ideas that I'm able to turn a blind eye to most of its shortcomings and suspend my disbelief at a lot of the over-the-top goofiness, which is more than I can say for something like, say, Blue Lock is overrated. And that is why I believe Haikyu is truly the greatest modern sports anime. As for the greatest sports manga of all time though, well, that my friend is a story for another day. Until then though, I'm the pseudo-intellectual, and thank you for watching.